I always tell people this. Some cold cases die because time erases the evidence. But others, well, others stay alive because the truth refuses to stay buried. I am an investigative narrator and documentarian. For the past 20 years, I followed some of the darkest unresolved disappearances across the United States. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I found in a crumbling apartment building on the outskirts of Cedar Falls. This story begins in 1979 with a young woman named Sarah Linden and a disappearance that baffled everyone who touched it. But it only ends because of something hidden, something waiting inside the walls. And I'm going to take you through every step of how a 42-year-old mystery unraveled because of a single forgotten machine. A tape recorder. The first time I saw Sarah Linden's photograph, I was struck by how ordinary she looked. Not glamorous, not mysterious, just normal. A 22-year-old graduate student preparing to move out of state for a research position. Shoulder-length brown hair, soft smile, a pair of round glasses that seemed too big for her face. On June 3, 1979, she simply disappeared from her one-bedroom apartment. No forced entry, no neighbors reporting screams, no signs of a struggle, no fingerprints from anyone except her own. The case was textbook impossible, as one retired detective once put it. It went cold within a week. But when I started researching this documentary decades later, something felt off to me. It wasn't the lack of evidence. It was the presence of silence, the kind of silence that doesn't occur naturally, the kind of silence someone creates. For years, the police treated it as a possible runaway, a voluntary disappearance, even a romantic dispute. But Sarah's family insisted she had no reason to run, and no partner. People don't vanish into thin air. Someone makes them vanish. Still, in 1979, nobody could prove anything. Not yet. Fast forward to 2021. Cedar Falls had changed. The city's old residential blocks were being torn apart and rebuilt into modern apartments. One of those buildings, the very one Sarah lived in, had been mostly vacant for years. Mold crawled up the wallpaper. Floorboards groaned under their own weight. It smelled like damp dust and forgotten memories. It was here that a renovation crew cut into a wall and discovered something they couldn't explain. When the call came in, I was already 3 states away filming another project. But the moment I heard the words, possible evidence in a cold case, I canceled everything and boarded a plane. I knew, instinctively, that whatever they found wasn't small. And I was right. The renovation foreman walked me into what used to be Sarah's living room. The workers had already peeled away most of the drywall, exposing wooden studs and old wiring. But in the cavity between 2 beams, someone had created a narrow compartment, just wide enough to hide a handheld tape recorder. Not a modern digital one. The old kind. Heavy, metal, reel-to-reel. Decades of dust clung to it like a second skin. "What made you cut here?" I asked the foreman. He told me one of the workers heard a strange, hollow thump when removing a panel. It wasn't part of the building structure. It didn't belong. So they pried deeper and found the machine wrapped in yellowed cloth. At first, I assumed it was broken junk someone had stashed away. Maybe a tenant had used the wall as a makeshift hiding place. But when I lifted the recorder, something rattled inside. A reel. Still loaded. Still intact, though badly damaged. That alone was remarkable. Tape shouldn't survive 4 decades of heat and moisture inside a wall. But somehow, it had. And that's when I felt something shift. A small, electric awareness creeping up my spine. This recorder didn't accidentally fall into the wall. Someone put it there. On purpose. But the biggest question was, why? Before I left the building that day, the foreman casually mentioned that someone else had already shown interest in the recorder. A man who'd stopped by earlier asking about the renovation. Tall guy, he said. White hair, mid-70s. Looked official. Said he used to work this neighborhood. I asked, did he give a name? He frowned. Yeah, think it was Reese. Or Reisman. Something like that. He said he was retired law enforcement. My heart dropped. Not because of the name, yet, but because of the timing. As far as I knew, nobody outside the crew and the property manager should have known a tape recorder had been found. Certainly not a retired police officer. Why would he be here the same day they discovered it? Coincidence? No. I've learned not to believe in coincidences. Someone had been waiting, watching the building, monitoring the renovations. And the moment something inside the wall was disturbed, he came to check on it. But he was too late. The recorder was in my hands, and I planned to dig until I found the reason he cared so much. Back in my hotel room that night, I placed the recorder on the desk and stared at it for a long time. Its buttons were rusted. The cloth wrap smelled of mildew. The reel inside looked stretched and warped. Still, a chill settled over me, not because of what I saw, but because of what I felt. This was evidence, not forgotten trash, not coincidence. Evidence deliberately hidden and accidentally found. I didn't dare try to play it. Doing so could destroy the tape completely. Instead, I arranged for a professional audio restoration specialist to meet me the next morning. Her name was Lana Brooks, a woman whose reputation included salvaging audio from car-wrecked black boxes and fire-damaged police evidence. If anyone could pull something from this tape, it was her. When she arrived, she examined the reel through gloves and magnifying lenses. "There's deterioration," she murmured, "but the magnetic layer is mostly intact. There's definitely sound on this. I can try to restore it, but it'll take time." "How much time?" "A day. Maybe 2. I nodded. But then she added something that made my stomach tighten. "Whatever's on this, it's old. But it's important. I can feel it." I didn't tell her I felt the same thing. The restoration process took 28 hours. I paced my hotel room. I stared at the recorder. I searched the name Reese and Reisman. I combed through the history of officers who had worked the Cedar Falls district in 1979. And when Lana finally called me back, her voice was shaking. "Daniel, you need to hear this in person." I rushed to her studio. She dimmed the lights, sat me down, and placed headphones over my ears. "Remember," she said, "this is after heavy restoration. The original was much worse. Some parts are missing. But, listen." She pressed play. For several seconds, there was only static. A faint hiss. The sound of old tape gasping its last breath. Then, the faint outline of a woman's voice, distressed, trembling. "Please, I don't want any trouble." My chest tightened. "Sarah." It had to be. Another voice overlapped hers. Male, deeper, controlled. "You said you were leaving town. Why didn't you tell me?" More static. A loud clatter. Something hitting the floor. The woman gasped sharply. "Stop. Don't." Then a violent thud. Then silence. I leaned back in my chair, breathless. "That's not all," Lana whispered. "There's more on the other side of the reel. But I need your permission before I play it. Because if this is what I think it is, it changes everything." I nodded once. She pressed play again. This time, the man's voice was clearer. Almost crystal clear. "I told you what would happen if you didn't listen." I froze. The sentence wasn't angry. It wasn't panicked. It was calm, cold, practiced. Lana looked at me with wide eyes. "Do you recognize it?" she asked. I swallowed hard. Because yes, I did. The voice on the tape matched one I had heard earlier that day in an old recording from the Cedar Falls Police Department. The voice of Detective Harold Reisman, the very man assigned to investigate Sarah's disappearance in 1979, and the same man the foreman saw snooping around the building hours after the tape was found. That was when I realized something horrifying. The detective who was supposed to find Sarah Linden was the last person to hear her alive. People ask me all the time, how do you stay objective when you uncover something horrifying? The truth is, you don't. Not at first. When I heard Detective Harold Reisman's voice, clear, controlled, unmistakable, emerge from a tape hidden 42 years ago, every hair on my arms rose. Investigators are trained to listen for emotional signatures, panic, guilt, fear. But Reisman's voice carried none of that. It carried ownership, as if Sarah was never a missing person in his eyes. She was a problem he had already solved. I stared at the waveform dancing across Lana's screen, each rise and fall marking a sound from 1979 resurrected in 2021, and I realized this wasn't just evidence. This was a confession, buried in plaster and drywall. But as any investigator knows, evidence isn't truth until it survives scrutiny. And this was only the beginning. "Where is he now?" Lana asked quietly, as though the man on the tape could somehow hear us. I had already looked him up. "Retired," I said. "Lives on the east side of Cedar Falls. Well respected. Volunteered at community events. Mentored young officers. The whole department treats him like a legend." Lana blinked slowly. "So, nobody suspects him?" "No," I said, "because he buried the only proof. Or so he thought." I stood up, pacing the small studio, my mind racing. My chest felt tight, not from fear, but from a different kind of pressure. The kind that comes when you realize you're holding something explosive. "Daniel," Lana said, "you need to take this to the police." I shook my head instantly. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because if Reisman is who I think he is, he still pays attention. He knew about the renovation. He showed up at the building. If he learns this tape was recovered before I'm ready, before we gather more, he'll disappear. Or worse, make someone else disappear." I'd seen it before. Cold case killers don't panic. They prepare. I left Lana's studio with a digital copy of the restored recording and drove straight to the Cedar Falls Records Department. I had a simple request: access to the original case files from 1979. They weren't classified anymore, just fragile. The clerk brought out a faded cardboard box with the name Sarah Linden on the label. Inside were the usual elements: interview scene photographs typed, memoranda, evidence logs. But something was wrong. Reisman's notes were thin, too thin. A disappearance investigation should contain dozens of follow-ups, but his file held only 3 short interviews and a single page summarizing the search. His investigative conclusion was even stranger. No indication of criminal activity. Subject may have left voluntarily. Case suspended pending additional leads. Voluntarily. I had just heard her voice on tape, terrified, pleading. Then I noticed something else. Paperwork was missing. The evidence log listed a tape recorder found on kitchen table, seized as potential evidence and tagged with an item number. But no physical tape was present in the box. No transcript. No audio summary. No follow-up report. Like the tape never existed. But it did exist. Not in the box, but inside the wall. My heart thudded. Had Reisman confiscated the recorder, realized it captured incriminating audio, and then attempted to hide it? Perhaps he wrapped it in cloth, planned to retrieve it later, but something went wrong. Maybe Sarah struggled harder than he expected. Maybe someone came to the door. Maybe time forced him to act faster than planned. And in the rush, he forgot the tape recorder entirely. He left behind the one thing that could destroy him. At the bottom of the case box was something that didn't belong. An unlabeled Polaroid photo tucked between 2 reports. It showed the corner of a room, Sarah's living room, with cheap wallpaper and a small wooden table. A tape recorder sat on the table, the same type found in the wall. But in this photo, something looked off. A thin cable ran from the recorder toward the wall, disappearing behind a piece of furniture. Why would a portable recorder be plugged into the wall behind a cabinet? Unless it wasn't being used normally. Unless it was being used to record someone without their knowledge. I felt a jolt. Was this Reisman's tactic? A scare method? An intimidation tool? A way to keep leverage over women he targeted? If so, how many tapes had he made? How many victims had never been believed because the man investigating them was the one hurting them? I suddenly felt sick. This wasn't just a missing person case. It was the unraveling of a predator who had used his badge like a hunting license. I returned to my hotel with the case file and listened to the restored audio again, this time cranking the volume to catch even the faintest details. Static. Sarah's trembling voice. Reisman's cold reply. Then, right after the thud, something I hadn't noticed before. A whisper. So faint it blended with the hiss. I replayed it, slowed it down, filtered the frequency, and there it was. He said nobody would believe me. Not from Sarah. From another woman. A second voice. Overlapping slightly, as if recorded onto the same reel at a different time. A second victim. I sat frozen. This wasn't an isolated crime. It was evidence of a pattern. A serial offender, protected by the badge, shielded by authority, operating under the radar for decades. And if the second woman existed, maybe the others never survived long enough for anyone to find them. The walls of my hotel room suddenly felt too close. I had to move. I drove to Reisman's address. Not to confront him, yet, but to observe. His house was exactly what you'd expect from a man with awards lining his fireplace. Modest, clean, meticulously maintained. Curtains pressed into perfect folds. Yard trimmed like a military haircut. A predator's camouflage is always neat. I parked down the street and watched. At 5:14 p.m., the front door opened. He stepped out. Age had taken some weight from his frame, but he still moved with the posture of someone used to authority. White hair, square jaw, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. He locked the door carefully, checked it twice, then walked toward his car. I noticed something. He carried a small canvas bag, the same kind evidence technicians use. What was inside it? Something from the building, something he feared the workers might uncover next. He started the engine, and then he did something that chilled me far more than the tape. He looked directly into his rear-view mirror, not a casual glance, a deliberate one, searching for a tail. This man was not retired in his mind. He was still covering tracks. I slouched lower in my seat, heart hammering. He hadn't seen me, but he sensed someone was watching him. Predators developed that instinct. I returned to Lana's studio that evening to share what I'd found. She listened silently as I played the faint second voice. Her face went pale. "This wasn't his first time," she whispered. "No," I said. "And the presence of multiple recordings means he cataloged things. Men like him don't stop. They document." She exhaled shakily. "Daniel, you're not safe if he knows you have this." "He doesn't. Yet." The word hung in the air. "We need to finish restoring the full reel," I said. "If there are more voices, more names, anything, this case becomes bigger than Sarah. It becomes a pattern spanning decades." Lana hesitated. "There's something else I didn't tell you earlier," she said. "On the original tape, before I cleaned up the audio, I heard a clicking sound. Regular, repetitive, almost like a camera shutter, I guess." Her eyes widened. "Yes, a tape recorder and a camera. A victim's pleas. A detective with a pattern. This was no longer a cold case. This was a monster study." Lana handed me a flash drive. "I finished stabilizing the remaining audio," she said. "It's rough, but you'll understand it." I thanked her and returned to my hotel again, stomach in knots. I plugged the drive into my laptop and pressed play. Static. Clicks. Footsteps. Then, Reisman's voice, softer this time. "Look at me." A woman whimpered. "No, please. Look at me." Then another thud. Another cry. My fists clenched involuntarily. He'd recorded everything. For what purpose? Control. Power. Memory. Then came a sound I didn't expect. A door opening. Someone entering the room. And Reisman muttering. "Not now." I said not now. The rest was static. I replayed that moment a dozen times. A second person was in the apartment during the crime. Who? An accomplice. A witness. Another victim. I didn't know. But the more I listened, the more certain I became. Reisman hadn't acted alone. The walls had hidden more than one secret. At 2:17 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered groggily. A voice, deep, old, calm, filled the line. "You've listened to the tape." My blood ran cold. I froze, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. The voice continued. "You need to stop. No threat. No shouting. Just a statement of fact." Then the line went dead. I sat there in the dark, shaking. He knew. He knew I had the audio. He knew I had the files. He knew I was getting close. But one question churned inside my mind. How did he get my number? And then another, darker one. What else did he know? Power goes out. A killer's name resurfaces. Tape splices reveal a second victim. And now, a retired detective with a predator's history has my phone number. I didn't sleep after that call. I didn't even lie down. I spent those hours between 2:17 a.m. and sunrise pacing my hotel room, replaying the voice in my ears. Reisman didn't speak with the anger of a man caught off guard. He spoke with the confidence of someone who believed the narrative still belonged to him. You need to stop. Not drop the tape. Not return what you have. Not forget this. Just stop. As if truth itself answered to him. Predators age. Power does not. At sunrise, I left the hotel. Whatever fear I felt had hardened into a heavier emotion. Duty. I had stumbled into something monstrous, but now that I tasted the truth, stepping back wasn't an option. Cold cases don't close themselves. They squeeze until someone breaks. And this one was squeezing me. Before I made my next move, I needed context, names, patterns, unresolved disappearances from around 1979. I returned to the Cedar Falls Public Archives when they opened at 8 a.m. sharp. The archivist, a thin woman with silver-framed glasses, recognized me from yesterday and retrieved local newspapers from the late 70s. Within minutes, something jumped out. A missing person headline from October 1978. Local woman vanishes walking home from late shift. Victim, Maria Gutierrez, age 24. No evidence. No suspects. Case dismissed as a runaway. 2 months before Sarah. Same age range. Same neighborhood. Same lack of evidence. I requested more files. Next, February 1980. 22-year-old office intern missing after work. Victim, Leah Porter. Then again, May 1976, April 1977, June 1981. Women between 20 to 25. All vanished within a 6-block radius of Sarah's building. All reported by families as not the type to run away. Yet every case summary listed similar phrasing. No signs of foul play. Possible voluntary departure. Not enough evidence to pursue. I checked who investigated each one. Nearly all were assigned to the same lead detective. Detective Harold Reisman. My stomach twisted. This wasn't coincidence. This was a hunting ground. I drove straight back to the old building. The property manager, Mr. Hanley, was a tired man in his 60s who carried the exhaustion of someone who had managed too many broken furnaces and overdue rents. I showed him my documentary credentials, explained I was working on a follow-up about the renovation crew's discovery, and asked if anyone who lived here in 1979 might still have information. He shook his head. This place emptied out after the 80s. Too many problems. Mold. Electrical issues. Ghost stories. Ghost stories. I repeated. He chuckled nervously. Not real ghosts. People just said, strange things happened here long ago. What kind of strange? There was a neighbor across the hall from Sarah Linden. Old Mrs. Calloway. She told everyone the police scared her into silence. My pulse kicked. Do you know where she is now? She died 6 months ago. Dementia. But her daughter, Nina, still lives in town. He scribbled a name and address on a sticky note. Before I left, I asked, "Can I see Sarah's old apartment?" He hesitated. The place is gutted. Nothing left. I still want to see it. He sighed and led me upstairs. Most of the walls were stripped bare, studs exposed like ribs. Sunlight filtered through plastic sheeting covering an open section. But the shape of the apartment remained. Kitchen to the left, living room ahead, bedroom behind a half wall. I stepped onto the old hardwood floor. You can't always feel history, but sometimes your body knows things before your mind does. A strange heaviness settled over me, as if the room retained an echo of the moment everything went wrong. Where exactly did they find the recorder? I asked. Hanley pointed to a cavity between the living room studs, right next to the electric outlet. My mind snapped back to the Polaroid photo from the police file, the cable running behind the furniture toward the wall. The recorder hadn't been inside the wall at first. It had been connected to an outlet, planted, running continuously, recording everything. For how long? For how many victims? I crouched, peering into the open section of wall. A small notch had been carved into one of the beams, rough, hand-cut. Someone had created a hiding place. Not an accident. A habit. I photographed everything, every angle, every detail. Then I thanked Hanley and left. But something followed me out of that apartment. A pressure. A presence. And when I stepped outside, wind biting against my neck, I had the sudden sensation of being watched. The kind of feeling you can't rationalize away. Predators develop instinct, yes. But so do their pursuers. Nina Calloway lived in a small, quiet house at the edge of town. When she answered the door, she was cautious at first, but softened when I mentioned her mother. We sat in her living room, surrounded by crocheted blankets and framed photos. My mother talked about Sarah Linden a lot near the end, Nina said. She was obsessed. Said something terrible happened across the hall, but nobody would listen. What did she witness? I asked. She never told me details, only that she heard a fight. A man's voice. A crash. Then silence. Did she call the police? Oh yes, Nina said. And the officer who came, he told her she must have heard things wrong. That the girl probably left with a boyfriend. Then he came back the next day. And the next. Why? Her expression darkened. He wanted her quiet. She was scared of him. She said he had a way of talking that made you feel like you didn't want to disagree. Do you know his name? I remember it because she complained about him so much. Nina's lips tightened. Detective Reisman. My chest tightened. So she believed Sarah didn't leave voluntarily. She said she heard the girl cry out. Said it wasn't an argument, it was fear. Nina grew quiet. Before Mom died, she whispered, she told me something else. Something she never told anyone. What? Nina stood, walked to a drawer, and returned with a small folded napkin. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a rusted key. Mom said she found this in the hallway the night Sarah disappeared. A key. She thought it belonged to Sarah. She was going to give it to the police, but after how they treated her, she never did. I examined it. Old, brass, apartment style. Not a house key. Not a mailbox key. A locker key. My pulse quickened. A locker could store anything. Documents, tapes, photographs, trophies. Predators hide things in places only they can access. Do you know where this locker is? I asked. Nina shook her head. Mom didn't know. She said she found it near the stairwell. Maybe Sarah dropped it while someone was forcing her out. I thanked her, gripping the key tightly as I left her house. The cold air hit me like a slap, because I realized what this meant. Sarah had been heading somewhere important. Somewhere she needed a key. Somewhere she intended to protect something. Or hide something from someone. And she never made it. I returned to my hotel with the key still warm from my palm. My brain churned. Locker. Key. Tape recorder. Missing evidence. A pattern of disappearances. A detective who silenced witnesses. I needed clarity, but the moment I closed my door, I felt something wrong. Out of place. A shift in the air. I froze. The closet door, closed when I left, was now open a crack. I approached slowly, heart pounding. Every instinct screamed caution. I pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. My hand hovered above the handle. I flung it open. Nothing. Just coats, shoes, hotel hangers. But on the floor, a small piece of paper, folded twice. I picked it up, hands trembling, and opened it. Inside, written in blocky, deliberate handwriting. I warned you. My throat tightened. Someone had entered my room while I was gone. Someone who knew my investigation. Someone who wanted me scared. but the handwriting, sharp, controlled, had the same precision as the man's voice on the tape. Reisman was watching me. He wasn't hiding from the truth. He was guarding it, fiercely. The next morning, with no sleep behind me, I drove to the Cedar Falls bus depot, train station, public storage sites, anywhere that historically used small brass keys like the one I now carried. Most lockers were modern now, digital, electronic, keypads. But older places still had relics of the past. At the third location, an ancient Greyhound station that looked unchanged since the 1970s, I found a row of antique lockers. I inserted the key into locker number 47 on a whim. It didn't turn, but when I tried number 28, I felt the faintest click. Not enough to open it, but enough to know it belonged here. The lock was rusted shut. The key was right. The locker, Sarah's locker, was here. But whatever had been inside it, maybe removed, maybe stolen, or maybe someone else had a copy of the key. I glanced around the empty terminal. Too quiet, too still. And then, behind me, a soft footstep. I turned, but saw no one. Just the terminal's long-shadowed hallway. I felt eyes. I left the terminal. Fast. I needed help. Someone outside of Cedar Falls. Someone who could protect the tape. Someone who could protect me. But I didn't get far. Because as I reached my car, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A single sentence. Locker 28 was emptied 42 years ago. Then, stop digging. I stared at the screen, cold flooding my chest. He wasn't guessing. He knew exactly where I had gone. Which meant only one thing. I was being followed. Fear is a strange thing. It doesn't hit all at once. It spreads, quietly, like ink soaking through paper, until you realize everything is stained. After receiving that text message, I sat in my car outside the Greyhound station, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my hands trembled. The message wasn't a warning. It was a demonstration. Reisman knew where I was. He knew what locker I'd tried. He knew my movements almost as soon as I made them. Which meant he wasn't just watching me. He was tracking me. But how? I checked my phone for hidden apps or GPS pings. Nothing unusual. I searched the underside of my rental car. No trackers, at least none I recognized. But his knowledge was too precise. The only explanation chilled me. Someone on the inside was feeding him information. Someone in law enforcement, or someone close to the investigation. And if Reisman wasn't working alone back in 1979, he probably wasn't alone now. This wasn't just the story of a killer. It was the story of a system designed to protect him. I returned to locker number 28 with renewed determination. I twisted the key again, 1, 2, 3 times. It moved more smoothly now, as if my earlier effort had loosened corrosion. Still didn't open. But then I noticed something. A faint line of scrape marks around the lock. Fresh ones. Someone had accessed this locker recently. Not 42 years ago. Recently. What had they taken? Evidence? Tapes? Photographs? Or something of Sarah's? I knelt and peered closer. Something white glinted at the back of the locker. Small, paper-thin. But the door wouldn't open far enough to reach it. I took out my pocket knife and worked the blade into the thin gap between metal and door frame. Slowly, carefully, I dragged the scrap forward until it fell to the floor outside the locker. It was a torn piece of paper. Yellowed. Old. I unfolded it gently. It was part of a bus ticket. Cedar Falls, Chicago. Date, June 3, 1979. Departure time, 7:15 p.m. Sarah was planning to leave the same day she disappeared. It wasn't just a rumor. It wasn't speculation. She was leaving town. She had a bus ticket. But why didn't she make it to the bus? Why did she return to her apartment instead? And then I noticed something scrawled faintly on the back of the ticket. A single word. Please. Not a message to herself. A message to someone else. My pulse thudded. She was begging. In writing. The ticket trembled in my hand. Suddenly, everything matched. The urgency in her voice on the tape. The fear. The desperation. Sarah wasn't planning to leave Cedar Falls for a job. She was running from someone, and she didn't get far. I couldn't return to my hotel, not after finding that threatening note in my closet. I called the front desk for my car and asked a question I already dreaded. Can you check your hallway security cameras for the past 24 hours? The clerk hesitated. Is there a problem, sir? A serious one, I said. 5 minutes later, the hotel manager called back. Mr. Shaw, we checked the cameras. There's nothing. No one went into your room, he said. Except you. A cold sensation spread through me. Either they weren't telling the truth, or someone with access to the system wiped the footage. Both possibilities were equally terrifying. I thanked him and hung up. If someone had entered my room undetected, they could enter again. If someone had wiped the footage, they could erase other evidence too. Either way, my hotel wasn't safe. I drove to the outskirts of town, pulled into an empty diner parking lot, and forced myself to think. Locker 28 was emptied recently. Reisman had inside information. Someone followed me. Someone entered my hotel room. Someone left a note. This wasn't intimidation anymore. It was preparation. They were preparing for something. And then I realized something far worse. If they were watching me, they were also watching Lana. My chest clenched. She had the original tape in her studio, the only physical evidence capable of putting Reisman away. And I had led him straight to her. I sped back toward the city, calling Lana's number over and over. No answer. Voicemail each time. Every second of silence gnawed at me. When I reached her building, the studio lights were off. The lobby was dark. The security guard's booth was empty. I hammered on the glass door. Lana, it's Daniel. Open the door. Nothing. I ran around to the back entrance, also locked. No sign of forced entry, no broken glass, no struggle. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. I pulled out my phone and hovered over the option to call 911, but hesitated. If Reisman still had allies in the system, a police call could alert the wrong people. And if they silenced her, they could certainly silence me. I needed to get inside on my own. Circling the building again, I tried the maintenance door. Locked. I bent down and looked more closely. The lock wasn't broken. It was new. Brand new. Someone had changed it recently. Someone who had access to the building. I stepped back, heart racing. I had to assume the worst. Lana was gone. Taken. Or forced to disappear. Oh, no. I refused to finish that thought. But one thing was certain. The tape inside her studio was gone. The only question was whether they took it before or after she played it one final time. As I stood in that alley, sick with panic, another thought struck me. Lana might not have been the only one listening to the tape. If Reisman had a partner, someone who kept track of renovations, someone who wiped hotel footage, someone who emptied lockers, then that person might also have known about the recording. Which meant Sarah wasn't his only victim, and Lana wasn't his only target. I returned to my car and pulled up the restored audio files again. I hadn't fully analyzed the background noise yet, but now, with everything spiraling, it felt urgent. I increased the volume. Listened deeper. Static. Clicks. Shuffling. Then, beneath everything, voices. Not clear ones, but whispers. Women. Plural. Crying. Begging. Pleading. I enhanced the audio. A single phrase emerged. Don't let him. Then another. Please, I won't tell. Then, stop. Each voice distinct. Each terrified. This wasn't one recording. This was a compilation. A reel used again and again. A trophy collection. Reisman didn't make mistakes. He made archives. Predators like him often keep souvenirs. Hair, jewelry, letters. But this was worse. He kept voices. The proof washed over me with nausea. Reisman wasn't just a killer. He was a collector. And collectors don't stop until someone stops them. Desperate for answers, I dug deeper into Reisman's history, not through the official police channels, but newspaper archives, pension records, old retirement newsletters. One name kept appearing. Detective Alan Mercer, assigned as his partner from 1977 to 1982. Mercer retired 10 years earlier, moved to a rural area outside of Cedar Falls. No scandals, no major cases credited to him. But one article caught my eye. A retirement speech photograph. Mercer stood smiling, holding a plaque. Behind him, Reisman, hand on his shoulder, smiling wider. If Reisman had an accomplice, or someone who helped cover things up, it was most likely the person standing behind him in that photo. So I drove to Mercer's property. Farmland. 3 horses. A sagging porch. Quiet. Too quiet. I parked down the road and approached on foot. Halfway up the driveway, I stopped. Mercer's front door was open. A bad sign. A very bad sign. I stepped inside slowly. "Detective Mercer," I called. No response. Dust motes floated through the shafts of light. The living room was untouched. A coffee mug sat half full. A newspaper lay open. But the silence was wrong. Then I saw it. A chair overturned. A lamp broken. A faint smear on the floor. Blood. Not a lot, but enough. My chest tightened. Someone had come here. Recently. Forcefully. And whoever it was, they didn't want Mercer to talk. I backed out of the house. My hands shook uncontrollably. Reisman was eliminating loose ends. And I had just walked into a crime scene that wasn't even cold yet. As I reached my car, headlights swung around the bend. A police cruiser. For a split second, I thought maybe someone had already called it in. A neighbor. A passerby. The cruiser slowed beside me. The window rolled down. Sheriff Patterson, a broad man with a hard stare, leaned out. "Evening," he said coldly. "You mind telling me what you're doing out here?" My throat tightened. Think. "I'm filming a documentary," I said, "about the Linden case. I was hoping to speak with Detective Mercer." The sheriff's eyes didn't waver. "He's not here." "Yes," I said softly. "I can see that." A long pause. Too long. Then he said something that turned my blood to ice. "You're not from around here. You don't know how things work. People don't appreciate outsiders stirring up old stories." "Sheriff," I said carefully, "something happened inside that house. You saw it, didn't you?" Another long stare. "Then you need to leave Cedar Falls," he said. "Tonight." I swallowed hard. "Is that a threat?" "No," he said coldly. "A warning." He held my gaze. Too steady. Too knowing. He knew Reisman. He knew about the old cases. And he knew what would happen if I stayed. The cruiser rolled away slowly. And I realized I wasn't just fighting a man. I was fighting a history. A network. A town that had kept its secrets buried for decades. But I wasn't leaving. Not until I uncovered everything. Not until Sarah, and every forgotten woman, had justice. If I had learnt anything, it was this. I was no longer investigating a cold case. I had stepped into an active crime scene, one still unfolding, one that had begun decades ago and was now accelerating towards something violent. And every minute I kept digging, the danger grew sharper. But the truth has a gravity to it. Once you touch it, it pulls you in deeper. There's no climbing back out. Not for me. Not anymore. After Sheriff Patterson drove away, I sat in my car for almost a full minute, engine off, hands trembling over the steering wheel. "Leave Cedar Falls," he'd said. He wasn't protecting me. He was protecting someone else. Reisman. And maybe Mercer, if Mercer was even still alive. The smear of blood in Mercer's doorway haunted me. It was small, but that didn't mean hope. Small amounts of blood often meant someone was taken alive. The sheriff had arrived too quickly, too conveniently, as if he'd been monitoring anyone who came near Mercer's house. Which meant he expected someone to come. Which meant Mercer was a liability. And liabilities get erased. This wasn't corruption, not just corruption, anyway. It was loyalty. Loyalty built over decades. loyalty to a man who had controlled a department from the shadows. Detective Harold Reisman wasn't just a predator. He was a king, and I had wandered into his kingdom with a torch in hand. I drove back to the diner parking lot where I'd sat earlier. The sun was setting now, streaking the sky orange and red, too beautiful for the kind of darkness I was uncovering. I pulled the partial bus ticket from my pocket and studied it again. Cedar Falls, Chicago, June 3rd, 1979. Seat 14B. But now that the panic had faded, I saw something I hadn't before. Very faint pencil indentations on the back of the ticket, scratched so lightly they were almost invisible. I held it toward the windshield, letting the low sun skim across its surface. Letters revealed themselves. In a rush, my breath caught. A name. Tell Anna. Anna. The second voice on the tape. The terrified whisper. Don't let him. It wasn't just some other victim. It was someone Sarah knew. Someone Sarah trusted enough to name in a final message. Someone she believed needed to hear the truth or deliver it. And suddenly everything sharpened into focus. Sarah wasn't going to Chicago alone. She was going to warn someone. Or she was going to meet someone. Someone named Anna. I had a new lead, one untouched by Reisman, one he probably assumed died with time. I opened my laptop and searched the Cedar Falls archives for women named Anna connected to Sarah Linden. 2 results. Anna Carlisle, friend from university, moved away in 1985. Anna Shaw, no address listed, but birth year matched someone who would have been in their early 20s around 1979. Anna Shaw. My last name. Coincidence? Probably. But coincidences in Cedar Falls were beginning to feel like illusions. The archive listed Anna Shaw's last known address, a small boarding house near the industrial district. Maybe she had moved. Maybe she had died. Or maybe she had been forced to disappear, too. But I had to try. The building looked like it had been abandoned by Hope decades ago. The yellow porch light flickered, paint peeled like old pages curling in wind. I knocked twice. A woman in her 70s with hair like tangled silver thread answered the door. Yes. I'm looking for someone who used to live here, I said. Anna Shaw. Her eyes widened. She didn't invite me in. She didn't blink. She just whispered. Why are you asking about her now? My pulse jumped. People only respond like that when the past never truly dies. She was connected to a missing person case, I said. I'm trying to find out what happened to her. She left, the woman said quickly. A long time ago. Where did she go? I don't know. Did she leave voluntarily? A long silence. Then, slowly. No. The hair on my arms rose. What happened? I asked. The landlord looked over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to be listening from behind the walls. Then she stepped onto the porch, shut the door behind her, and whispered. Anna was scared. Terrified. She said a detective was following her, asking questions about her friend Sarah, cornering her in parking lots, driving past the house at night. She packed a bag and told me if she didn't come back by morning to call the police. But you didn't, I said quietly. She shook her head. The detective she was afraid of. He was the one who came when I called. He told me Anna had mental health issues. Said she left on her own. Said not to worry. My throat tightened. Did you ever see her again? No, the woman whispered. She vanished. Just like the others. I felt suddenly cold. Others? She nodded. There were always girls going missing back then. And somehow, it was always the same detective who handled the cases. They said he had a nose for those investigations. But now I wonder if he was hunting them. The porch light buzzed overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. And then the old woman asked me the question that made my blood run cold. You shouldn't be asking these things. He's still alive, isn't he? Yes. And you're still alive. For now. She grabbed my arm, grip surprisingly strong. Leave this town, she hissed. Or you won't be. Back in my car, I sat trembling until my breathing slowed. Then I searched deeper through digital archives for anything involving the name Anna Shaw. Nothing. But I did find one small piece, tucked inside a 1980 newspaper under classifieds. Young woman wanted for questioning in disappearance of friend. If you have seen Anna S., age 23, please contact Detective HR. My stomach twisted violently. Reisman hadn't only hunted her. He had made her the suspect. He had turned the truth inside out. Maybe Anna ran. Maybe she was taken. But that clipping told me something powerful. Anna knew what happened to Sarah. Enough to threaten him. Enough for him to destroy her. As I stared at the clipping, headlights flashed across my windshield. Someone had pulled into the far end of the empty street. A dark car. Lights off. Just idling. Watching. I swallowed hard. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe a resident returning home. But I trusted my instincts. And something told me that car wasn't here before. I turned the ignition and drove away without looking back. Back at the diner, I pulled into the deepest corner of the lot and shut off my headlights. Then I opened my laptop and the copy of the restored tape Lana had given me. Not the original, but the digital copy. The one she said she backed up, just in case. I hit play. Static washed through the speakers. Then Sarah's voice. Then Reisman's. Then the thud. I pushed the progress bar forward. The next section, the one I could barely listen to before, began. But this time, something new happened. A voice I hadn't heard before. Male. Not Reisman. Deeper. Rougher. Harry, hurry up. Someone's coming. Mercer. It had to be Mercer. But then more, mercifully faint, impossibly important. A woman screaming. Anna. Anna, run. The recording stopped. I froze. That wasn't Sarah's voice. It wasn't the second woman's voice. It was someone else. A third victim. A witness. Someone saw what happened. Someone Reisman never expected to survive long enough to be heard. But her voice wasn't distant. It was inside the room. She had been there. Which meant the story I thought I knew about June 3rd, 1979 wasn't the whole story. Sarah wasn't alone. She wasn't grabbed quietly. There was a struggle. There were witnesses. There were accomplices. And one of the voices said, Harry, hurry up. Harry. His first name. The man behind the mask. No detective. No authority. Just a predator being called to finish what he started. I rewound the tape. Listened again. Anna, run. The voice echoed in my skull. If Anna was there, if she witnessed something, if she fled, that meant locker 28 wasn't Sarah's locker. It was hers. She wasn't storing evidence for herself. She was storing something for Sarah. Or Sarah was storing something for her. The key in my pocket suddenly felt heavier. I had been holding the wrong assumption all along. This wasn't Sarah's locker. It was Anna's. And if the locker had been emptied recently, a horrifying possibility cemented. Anna Shaw might still be alive. My phone buzzed. I nearly jumped. Unknown number again. I answered cautiously. A woman's voice, hoarse, shaken, whispering, filled the line. Not Lana. Not the landlord. Not someone playing games. Daniel. My heart stopped. I don't know how you found me, she whispered. But if you keep digging, he'll kill you too. My throat tightened. Who is this? A shaky breath. You're trying to tell my story. My pulse hammered. Anna. A long pause. Then, broken. He's coming. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, lungs locked. Anna Shaw was alive. Alive, and being hunted again. 42 years later, the past wasn't just resurfacing. It was chasing her. And now, it was chasing me too. There's a specific kind of silence that follows terror. It isn't peaceful. It isn't still. It's tight, like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something to break. That's the silence I sat in after the phone call. Anna Shaw. Alive. Hunted. Calling me. And then, he's coming. Click. For a long moment, I could barely move. The diner parking lot felt too open, too exposed. Every passing car felt like a threat. Every shadow felt like it hid a watcher. My thoughts raced. If Anna called me, it meant she had been listening. She knew I was investigating. She knew I had the tape. But how? How had she found me before Reisman did? Unless she'd been running for so long that she learned to anticipate every step he made. Survival sharpens instinct in a way training never can. And that meant one thing. Anna could help me break this entire case open, if she lived long enough to meet me. I dialed back immediately. The number didn't ring. It played an automated message. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Already disconnected. Already burned. That was the method of someone who had survived decades of pursuit. She didn't want to be found, but she wanted me warned. I replayed the call in my mind, dissecting every detail. Her voice, the background noise, the tone. I heard wind, a faint whistling noise. Her voice echoed slightly, like she was outside, or near a tunnel, or a bridge. I wrote it down mechanically. Clue, wind. Outdoor echo. Fear. Movement. But fear wasn't a location. I needed something concrete. I pulled out a notebook and began mapping everything. Sarah Linden's apartment. Locker number 28. Mercer's house. The boarding house. The diner. The Greyhound station. The renovation site. The alley where Lana vanished. I circled each confirmed location involving danger or disappearance. A pattern slowly emerged. All points formed a loose circle around one central area of town. The old industrial district. Abandoned warehouses, factories, storage lots. If Anna was hiding anywhere, it would be there. Close enough to observe movement. Far enough to avoid foot traffic. But before I could act on that theory, another question rose like a cold wave. Why now? Why would Anna call me after decades of silence? Because she wasn't just running anymore. She was cornered. And cornered people reach for anyone who might save them. Even if that person is a stranger. Even if that person is the last thread between truth and oblivion. I started the engine and drove toward the industrial district. Not recklessly, but with the slow, deliberate caution of a man stepping into a sniper's nest. The industrial district looked like a graveyard of forgotten buildings. Rusted windows. Collapsed roofs. Faded paint peeling in long strips. Wind carrying dust like snow. Most buildings were dark. Except one. A faint light flickered in an old shipping warehouse. Building 14B, barely visible through the broken slats. Too dim to be useful, but bright enough to be intentional. I parked 2 blocks away, hidden behind a loading bay. I stepped out quietly, recording every sound, every movement. The wind howled around stacks of abandoned pallets. An empty soda can rolled across the asphalt, metallic and hollow. The place felt deserted. But I knew better. Predators choose isolation for a reason. I checked my phone. No signal. Dead zone. Perfect. Exactly where a hunter would drive his prey. I moved slowly along the building's wall, listening for anything. Breathing, footsteps, voices. Nothing. Then a soft clink. Metal on concrete. I crouched. Something small glinted by my shoe. A paperclip, bent out of shape. I picked it up. Cold. Freshly dropped. Someone had been here minutes ago. Or someone was still here. I stepped deeper into the alley and reached the warehouse's side entrance. The door was slightly open. Not broken. Not forced. Just open enough for a signal. Or a trap. Inside smelled like rust and mildew. A single hanging bulb flickered overhead. Light swung like a pendulum, illuminating stacks of wooden crates and iron beams. Then I saw it, written on the wall in chalk. Daniel, quiet. My blood froze. Anna had been here. Recently. And she knew I would come. Fear prickled up my spine. I scanned the corners, the shadows, every doorway. Somewhere in this building, she was hiding. Or watching. Or running. But before I could call out, another sound. A footstep. But not soft. Not light. Heavy. Deliberate. Male. I ducked behind a crate instantly. A silhouette appeared at the far end of the warehouse. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a slow, predatory certainty. Reisman. He was here. And he wasn't searching. He was following. He knew where I would go. He knew Anna would call. He knew the circle tightening around him. He was here to close it. I held my breath as he walked deeper into the warehouse, flashlight beams sweeping across floors and walls. "Anna," he called in a calm, chilling tone. "You've run long enough." His voice echoed through the building. 42 years. A pause. "You can come out now." My heart hammered. He didn't know I was here, or he didn't care. A hunter doesn't talk to the prey. He talks to the silence, because he knows the silence is alive. He stepped closer. "Anna, you've caused enough trouble. And this reporter." He smiled darkly. "He's just a loose end." I swallowed, barely daring to breathe. Loose end? Not yet. Not if I could get ahead of him. A faint movement caught my eye. Behind a collapsed stack of crates. A flash of something pale. A hand. A woman's hand. Anna. She was hiding where the flashlight beam didn't reach. Her fingers curled on the ground, trembling. I moved quietly, crouching, inching toward her. When I reached her, she flinched and pulled back, terror etched deep into her eyes. Her hair was long, unkempt, streaked with white, though she couldn't have been more than late 60s now. Her clothes were layered and torn, like someone who lived without a home for years. "Anna," I whispered, barely audible. "It's me, Daniel, the documentary host." Her eyes widened, recognition flickering. "You shouldn't have come," she breathed. Reisman's footsteps echoed. "Closer, closer. We need to move," I whispered. Anna shook her head violently. "He knows you're here." I froze. "What?" Her whisper cracked. "He's not here for me." A shudder. "He came for you." The world tilted. I had assumed he was hunting Anna. I had thought she was the prey. But I had become the target. Not because of what I discovered, but because of what I carried. The tape. The evidence. The truth. He didn't want to silence Anna. He wanted to silence the narrative. He wanted to silence me. A beam of light cut across the crates, sweeping sideways, coming straight toward us. "Anna," Reisman said softly, "I know you're here." "Then, and you brought him with you, didn't you?" My heart lurched. He knew. He had known the whole time. I grabbed Anna's hand. "We're leaving," I whispered. She didn't resist this time. We moved like shadows, quiet, crouched, slipping between crates and metal beams. But no matter how carefully we moved, Reisman's footsteps matched ours. He wasn't guessing. He was tracking, following minor sounds, disturbances in air. He was a predator who had hunted for 40 years. Experience doesn't age. Suddenly, Anna pulled me down behind a rusted conveyor belt. Her eyes wide. She pointed. There, a side exit, barely visible from where we were. A possible escape route. But between us and that door was open floor. No cover. No shadows. A killing ground. And Reisman had moved to the center of the warehouse. The perfect vantage point. "We'll be exposed," I whispered. Anna nodded. "That's the point." "What?" She turned to me, voice trembling. "I won't survive this." Her eyes shimmered. "But you have to." "No," I whispered fiercely. "We're both getting out." "You don't understand," she said. "You're the first person since Sarah who tried to tell the truth. If he kills you, the story dies again." My chest tightened. "Anna." She squeezed my hand. "Run when I tell you." Before I could argue, she stood. Anna, frail, shaking, exhausted Anna, stepped out into the open, straight into the path of Reisman's flashlight. "Harry!" she screamed. The warehouse exploded with sound. Her voice. His footsteps. The beam turning sharply. And then, Anna ran. Not toward him, but across his field of vision. A distraction. A sacrifice. "Run, Daniel," she screamed. "Run!" And I did. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the obedience to truth even when fear is absolute. I sprinted toward the side exit as the warehouse filled with the sound of two lives colliding. Anna's last stand. Reisman's pursuit. My escape. Behind me, a scream tore through the air. Then silence. Then the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. Echoing. Final. Dead. My body shook as I ran into the night. Breath burning. Heart breaking. Anna Shaw had survived 42 years of terror. Just to buy me 10 seconds of life. 10 seconds to run. 10 seconds to expose everything. 10 seconds to bring him down. And I wasn't going to waste them. Some moments never leave you. They don't fade. They don't soften. They stay sharp, permanent scars carved into memory. Anna's scream was one of them. So was the gunshot that followed. I didn't stop running. Couldn't. Every instinct I had screamed that stopping meant dying. The industrial district blurred past me. Rusted fences, broken windows, flickering streetlights. My lungs burned, my legs felt carved from iron, but adrenaline pushed me like a hand between my shoulder blades. Anna died so I could run, so I could expose him, so the truth could finally live. And I wasn't wasting that sacrifice. Not ever. I didn't go back to my hotel. I didn't go to the diner. I didn't go to any place familiar. Instead, I headed to the only place I hoped he wouldn't expect. The Cedar Falls Public Library. Neutral ground. Public. Open sight lines. Security cameras. Staff. Witnesses. Everything a predator avoids. I stumbled inside breathless, sweat-soaked, desperate. The librarian at the front desk looked alarmed. "Sir, are you all right?" "No," I whispered. "But I will be. I just need a private study room." She hesitated. I must have looked wild, panic in my eyes, dirt on my jacket, hands trembling. But she nodded and handed me a key. "Room 4. Just down the hall." I thanked her and hurried away. Inside the study room, I locked the door, lowered the blinds, and collapsed into the chair. My hands shook uncontrollably. I forced myself to breathe. In, slow, controlled. Finally, my heartbeat steadied enough for me to think again. I took out my laptop, opened a new document, and typed. "If you are reading this, I may already be dead." I wasn't being dramatic. I was being realistic. Reisman now had everything to lose. Everything to protect. Everything to destroy. People like him don't run. They erase threats. And now that Anna was gone, I was the last loose end. But I also had something he couldn't erase. A digital copy of the tape. Files stored in multiple cloud servers. Timed backups. Auto-distribution protocols. If anything happened to me, the evidence would spread like wildfire. But I needed more. Something concrete. Something irrefutable. Something physical. And that was when I remembered the key. I pulled it from my pocket. Cold brass. Old. Tarnished. Anna's key. Not Sarah's. The thing she held onto for 42 years even while running, hiding, surviving. She had risked her life to leave it behind for someone to find. For me to find. There was more to that locker. More than a torn bus ticket. More than a message. There had to be something else. Something she hid too well for even Reisman to find. I shouldn't have gone back. Every logical part of me screamed not to. But logic doesn't solve murder cases. Instinct does. And my instinct was clear. If Anna died shouting, "Run," she didn't mean run away. She meant run forward. Finish it. So I returned to the Greyhound station, but not recklessly. I circled the area twice. Checked reflections in windows. Scanned for shadows moving where shadows shouldn't. No dark sedan. No watchers. No threats, yet. Inside the old terminal, the air smelled like oil, dust, and the stale remnants of countless forgotten journeys. Locker 28 waited, unchanged. Old. Rusty. Silent. I inserted the key again. Turned. Click. Still locked. But I had a new thought now. What if the locker wasn't stuck? What if it had a second mechanism? I examined the metal frame more closely this time, feeling for unusual seams or hidden compartments. And then I found it. A small indentation underneath the lock plate, so faint it could be mistaken for normal wear. But the edges were too perfect. Someone had carved this intentionally. I slid the torn paperclip I'd found in the warehouse into the tiny groove. A soft metallic snap sounded from inside the locker. My breath caught. I turned the key again. This time the door swung open. Anna had built a double-lock mechanism. No wonder Reisman hadn't found what she hid. No wonder she kept the key for decades. I pulled the door fully open, heart pounding. Inside was a small metal box. Dusty, plain, locked. I lifted it gingerly. It weighed more than I expected. Back in the study room of the library, I broke the lock with the edge of my laptop charger plug. The box popped open, and inside, my breath left me. Letters, photos, notes, a small cassette tape, evidence. Not from 2021, not from recent events. Evidence from 1979. Anna had been collecting everything she could before she ran, while Sarah was alive. Before the night, everything fell apart. I began with the letter on top. The envelope was brittle with age, the paper yellowed. Inside, in Sarah Linden's handwriting, Anna, if anything happens to me, tell Daniel Shaw the truth. He'll know what to do. My heart stopped. Daniel Shaw, my name. But the letter was written in 1979, decades before I was born. I read it again, refusing to believe what my eyes showed me. Tell Daniel Shaw the truth. I felt the world tilt. That was impossible. Until I turned the page over. There, written in smaller letters, Daniel Shaw, journalist in Chicago. He said he'd help if I ever needed him. Relief hit me like a crash. Not me. My father. I sank back in my chair, breath shuddering. My father had been a journalist in the late 70s and early 80s. He died when I was 12, heart attack. I never knew he'd investigated anything connected to Cedar Falls. Never knew he had spoken to Sarah Linden. Never knew he had promised to help her. He must have been the one she trusted when she decided to run. He must have been the reason she bought the bus ticket. He must have been the one she planned to meet in Chicago. My throat tightened. My father had almost cracked this case before I was even born. And now, I was finishing what he started. Tears welled in my eyes. Painful. Unexpected. For a moment, I wasn't a documentarian. I was a son. But there was no time for grief. Not yet. I wiped my eyes and reached for the cassette tape. The tape was labeled simply, June 3rd, 79. For Anna. For the day everything happened. For the truth. I didn't have a cassette player with me, so I ran downstairs and asked the librarian if they had old media equipment. Actually, yes, she said. We keep one for archival transfers. 5 minutes later, I sat in a tiny audio room, headphones on, the cassette inserted. I pressed play. Soft hiss. Tape crackle. And Sarah's voice. Alive. Clear. Not terrified yet. She was whispering. Anna, he knows. I think he found the ticket. I'm coming to your place. If I don't make it, please, please don't let him find the tape. Tape. Another tape. A different one than the wall recorder? My eyes widened. Locker 28, Sarah whispered. Put everything there. You know the double lock. Don't trust anyone. Not even the police. Especially not the police. My pulse raced. Then I heard it. A knock. Then another knock. Loud. Insistent. A door creaking. Footsteps. Sarah's voice, trembling now. No, no, please. Just leave me alone. A man's voice. Cold. Familiar. You should have listened. Rage boiled in my gut. Then a new voice. Female. Breathless. Sarah, run. Anna. She had been there. At the apartment. Before everything went wrong. I heard a struggle. Furniture shifting. Something breaking. A scream. Reisman snarling. Alan, help me. Mercer's voice entering sharply. Get her inside. A second scream. A door slamming. A violent thud. My chest ached. And then, the final words that shattered me. Anna, go. Please go. Silence swallowed the tape. Then a soft, broken whisper. I'm sorry. Anna's voice. Then footsteps running. Then the recording cut out completely. I sat frozen, unable to breathe. Anna had witnessed Sarah's murder. Anna had escaped. Anna had lived in terror for 42 years trying to protect this evidence. Now Anna was gone forever. But the cassette was still here, and the truth was finally undeniable. As I removed the headphones, I felt something shift in the air. A quiet creak, like a shoe on laminate flooring. I froze. Someone was outside the audio room. Slowly, a shadow moved across the bottom of the door. Then another. 2 people. Listening. Waiting. The librarian hadn't told anyone I was here, which meant the only people who knew my location were those who'd been tracking me. Those who followed me from the warehouse. Those who hunted Anna. Those who watched everything. I held my breath. The doorknob rattled. Once. Then twice. Slowly. Deliberately. Someone whispered through the door. A voice dripping with cold satisfaction. Daniel, open the door. My blood turned to ice. It was him. Reisman had found me. And this time, there was nowhere left to run. There is a moment, right before death feels certain, when your body becomes painfully aware of itself. The thudding of your heart. The burn in your lungs. The ringing in your ears. The cold sweat sliding down your spine. All of it collided inside me as I stared at the audio room door, and the shadow of the man who had killed Sarah Linden, who had hunted Anna Shaw for 4 decades, who had silenced anyone who threatened his story. Now he was here, outside this door, in this library, after following me through the labyrinth of a dying town. And his voice, steady, calm, impossibly controlled, slipped under the door like poison. Daniel, open the door. My first instinct was primal. Don't move. Even breathing felt like a risk. My pulse hammered so loudly I was certain he could hear it. The doorknob wiggled once more. A deliberate test. Then I heard a second voice, rougher, lower. Mercer. No. Mercer was gone. I'd seen the blood at his home. He was a loose end, erased. This voice was someone else. You are wasting time, Harry, the man muttered. Just break it down. My skin crawled. Reisman sighed. No. He's useful. He's the one who pulled everything together. He'll open it. Useful. They wanted me alive. Not for long, but long enough to extract what they needed. The location of the tape, the digital files, whether someone else had copies. I swallowed hard. My mind raced. These rooms were not soundproof. The library had cameras. It was a public building. Killing me here would force them to fabricate a story, bluff a cover-up, silence witnesses. Unless they didn't kill me here. Unless they only took me from here. That realization sent ice through my veins. I needed to move. Quickly. Silently. The only window in the room was small. Barely big enough for a human shoulder, and it didn't open fully. But I wasn't aiming to escape through it. I was aiming for time. The doorknob turned a 3rd time. This time harder. I jumped. Instinct took over. I grabbed the metal chair from beneath the desk and jammed its back under the handle at an angle, creating a makeshift barricade. The chair legs screeched against the floor, echoing through the small room. Reisman paused, then chuckled. A slow, amused, terrifying chuckle. You think that will stop me? No. I didn't think it would stop him, but it would slow him. And right now, seconds mattered more than anything. I yanked the cassette tape from the player and stuffed it into my inner jacket pocket. Next, I grabbed my laptop, shoved it into my bag, and slung it across my back. The window. I climbed onto the desk and pressed both palms against the small window, pushing it outward. It moved, an inch. Then another. Not enough to escape, but enough to signal for help. Enough to shout. Enough to draw eyes. But would I actually shout? If I made noise, Reisman might break through the door faster, kill the librarian, kill any witnesses, kill me. If I stayed silent, the choice felt impossible. Then, the door shook violently. The chair groaned under the pressure. They were starting to force it. No more time to think. I shoved the window wider and yelled, "Help! Call the police, now!" My voice echoed through the library. For a second, nothing happened. Then, shouts. Footsteps. The distant sound of books dropping. People were reacting. Good. Witnesses meant complications for him. Complications meant time for me. But then I heard his voice again through the door. "Daniel, you're making this harder than it needs to be." The next slam split the chair in half. Splinters flew. The door cracked along its frame. Another blow and the hinges would give out entirely. I had one option left. The window. I forced it open as wide as it would go. Still not enough for my whole body, but enough to squeeze through diagonally. Behind me, a final crash. The door exploded inward. The chair shattered. Metal scraped. A boot landed heavily inside. I didn't turn to look. Didn't want his face burned into my memory more than it already was. I climbed through. The metal frame scraped my ribs, tore into my jacket, ripped skin. Pain flashed across my side. But then, I was out. Falling. The window was high, 8 feet above a mulched landscaping bed. I landed hard, rolled instinctively, tried to stand. Footsteps thundered behind me. Voices shouting. A woman screaming for help. And then, the library alarm blared. Someone triggered it. Maybe the librarian, maybe a patron, maybe pure luck. But the blaring siren gave me the cover I needed. I sprinted around the building, pain flaring in my side, breath burning, ignoring everything but forward momentum, and dove into a gap between 2 dumpsters behind the library. Dark, filthy, hidden. I pressed myself into the shadow and listened. Footsteps grew closer. Boots on gravel. Breaths. 2 sets. Reisman and his accomplice. "Find him," the accomplice growled. "He can't be far." "He has the tape," Reisman hissed. "He won't leave it behind." They split up. Bootsteps retreating in different directions. I didn't move a muscle. Not for 30 long seconds. Not until the sirens of approaching police cars pierced the air. Actual police. Not his. Not Patterson. Not the corrupted few. These were responding to a public 911 call, a break-in, a disturbance, a credible alarm. They had to act. They had to show up. And they had. For the first time since arriving in Cedar Falls, I had a sliver of protection. But barely. If the sheriff took over the scene, I was still dead. I crawled out from the dumpster gap, careful, silent, staying in shadows until I reached the side street. I didn't head for my car. Reisman would expect that. I headed for an alley 2 blocks down, then a bus stop, then an Uber requested under a fake name. Only when I was inside the moving car did I finally breathe again. And even then, only barely. I didn't go to a hotel. Didn't go somewhere predictable. Instead, I found a 24-hour co-working space, an old brick building converted into small offices with lockable rooms, cameras everywhere, and dozens of potential witnesses. I rented a room with a credit card not tied to my name. Only when the lock clicked behind me did I exhale. I took out the box from Anna's locker and began laying everything out. Letters, notes, photos, the cassette, the partial bus ticket, a tiny photograph torn in half, a folded napkin with numbers written on it, a scrap of brown paper with a partial address, a rusted house key. Anna had created a private archive. Her archive. Pieces of a story she never got to tell. Pieces she wanted me to put together now. Pieces she died to protect. I picked up the torn photograph first. It showed Sarah and another woman, shoulder to shoulder, smiling at the camera in front of a diner. The other woman's face had been torn out. Anna. Sarah wrote on the back. She says the detective is watching again. I don't know if I'm paranoid or if she's right. This wasn't random. This was stalking. This was escalation. This was the beginning of a pattern. My stomach churned. I read the next note, then the next, then another, each one a breadcrumb. He asked if I was leaving town. He knows about the tape. Alan came to the apartment again. He wants the evidence. I can't breathe when he looks at me. Anna says we have to run. I think she's right. My chest tightened with every line. Then I found something that made my heart stop. A folded piece of lined paper. On it, in Sarah's handwriting, "If anything happens to Anna or me, find the recorder in my apartment wall." He doesn't know I hid it. I sat back in the chair, numb. She had hidden the recorder. Not panic. Not accident. Deliberate. She had hidden it knowing someone might find it decades later. My throat tightened. She had planned for this moment. For someone to find the truth. For me. Or someone like me. Or anyone who cared enough to listen. I swallowed hard, fighting emotion. Then I saw the old napkin covered in faded pencil scratches. Numbers. Coordinates. Addresses. Locker combinations. One line caught my eye. House number 19, basement. A surge of electricity ran through me. This was new. This wasn't part of anything the police knew. This wasn't part of anything Anna told me. This was something Sarah hid. And something Anna saved. House 19. Could be a storage property. Could be where the tapes were kept. Could be a burial site. Could be a torture room. Could be anything. But it was something. And if it was still standing, it could blow this case open beyond anything I had found so far. Before moving, I checked one last item in the box. A small, burned scrap of paper. Barely legible. But one sentence remained. "He won't stop until we're all gone." I closed the box gently. Anna was gone. Mercer was gone. Sarah was gone. The only ones left were Reisman and the truth. I zipped the evidence into my bag, heart pounding with purpose. My next move wasn't safe, wasn't logical, wasn't sane, but it was necessary, because now I had something Reisman didn't know yet. A location, and it might be the key to everything. Just as I stood to leave, my phone buzzed. A new number. Not Anna. Not unknown. Not threatening. A local landline. I hesitated. Answered. A scared male voice whispered, "Are you Daniel Shaw?" "Yes," I said cautiously. "You don't know me, but I know what you're doing, and I know who you're running from." My chest tightened. Who is this? My name doesn't matter. What matters is, if you go to that house, you won't make it out alive. I froze. "How do you know about the house?" He swallowed audibly. "Because I helped build it." Silence pressed between us. "I'm the one who poured the concrete over the basement floor," the man whispered. "He told me it was for storage." A shaky breath. "Daniel, nothing stored down there ever came back up." My blood turned to ice. This wasn't just a building. It was a grave. More than one grave. He continued, "If you're going there, go now. Before he moves what's left." What's left of what? A long, terrible silence. Then he whispered, "The bodies." Some stories begin with a disappearance. This one began with a discovery, a forgotten tape recorder buried behind a wall, waiting 42 years for someone to finally listen. And now, after everything, the chase, the deaths, the clues left behind by people long gone, the truth of what happened to Sarah Linden finally stood in front of me. But to reach it, I had to walk straight into the darkest place in Cedar Falls. House number 19. The house Anna and Sarah both feared. The house the construction worker warned me about. The house whose basement floor they poured concrete over, while something was still beneath it. A grave. Or several. I didn't call the police. Not the Cedar Falls police. Not after everything Sheriff Patterson said. Not after watching how deeply the old loyalties to Detective Harold Reisman still ran in this town. Instead, I called state investigators. people outside this county, outside Reisman's reach. I told them there was a suspected burial site tied to multiple disappearances over 4 decades, and that the property was in active danger of being tampered with. I didn't tell them my exact location yet. Not until I had proof. Because if I was wrong, if house number 19 was nothing but paranoia and fear whispering through my ribs, then I would lose the only allies I had left. But if I was right, then everything that happened to Sarah, to Anna, to the dozens of girls whose faces never even made the newspapers. It started here, and it could finally end here. I broke into house number 19 just before dawn, when the sky was gray and the world felt between breaths. The place was abandoned, but not forgotten. Dust lay on the furniture, yet the locks were newer than the house itself. The air smelled faintly of bleach. People had been here recently, but the basement door didn't match the others. Old, warped, splintered from the inside out. I opened it and descended carefully, flashlight quivering in my hand. The basement floor was just as the man described, freshly poured concrete over a much older foundation. It bulged in places. Small hairline cracks ran like veins across the surface. I walked the perimeter, heart pounding. Then I saw something half buried in one of the cracks. A silver earring. Tarnished. Bent. Old. I recognized it. It matched the one Sarah wore in her missing persons photo. And in that moment, I knew. I didn't need sonar. I didn't need cadaver dogs. I didn't need drills or picks or excavation equipment. The house itself was already telling the truth. I backed away, hand shaking, and called the state task force again, this time giving them the full location. It's real, I told them, and you need to come now. I climbed the stairs quickly, but someone was waiting at the top. Detective Harold Reisman stood in the kitchen doorway, silhouetted by morning light. No gun raised. No anger on his face. Just that same cold, steady expression I'd heard on the tape. Measured. Unshaken. "Daniel," he said, almost kindly, "you could have left town." I swallowed. "You killed them." "No," he replied softly. "I corrected them." His voice didn't shake. His hands didn't tremble. He believed every word. "You ruined too many lives," I said. "But it's over. The state police are on their way." He smiled, a thin, pitying smile. "You think I didn't plan for that? You think I didn't know how this would end? I've been preparing for 40 years. He stepped closer. "You're not the first reporter to chase one of my ghosts." A pause. "But you are the last." When he said that, something in me snapped. Because he wasn't talking about killing me. He was talking about my father. My voice cracked. "You killed him too." Reisman didn't deny it. He only shrugged, as if discussing whether. He should have stayed out of it. Every emotion, fear, rage, grief, collided inside me. But before I could speak again, sirens screamed outside. For the first time, his face changed. Shock. Then understanding. Then something colder than fear. He lunged at me, not to kill me, but to grab something. My bag. The evidence. He needed to destroy it. But adrenaline pushed me faster. I stumbled backward, tripped over the old basement threshold, and instinctively kicked the door closed as he lunged again. The heavy wooden door slammed, and locked from the inside. I heard him pounding, furious now, human now. "Open the door, Daniel. You don't know what you're doing." But I knew exactly what I was doing. I walked up the stairs, opened the back exit, and stepped into the arms of a dozen armed state officers. "He's downstairs," I said. "And he's not alone down there." They moved quickly. The last thing I heard before they stormed the basement was Reisman roaring my name like a wounded animal losing its territory. And then, silence, followed by, "Sir, you need to see this." The excavation took days. First they cut through the concrete, then the soil, then deeper. One by one, they uncovered partial remains, bone fragments, jewelry, scraps of clothing preserved in the soil. 9 victims, then 12, then 15. 15 young women who vanished between 1975 and 1982. all tied to the same detective, all dismissed as voluntary runaways, all buried in the same house. And when they compared dental records, DNA, and evidence, the first confirmed match they found was Sarah Linden. The second was Anna Shaw, recovered near the warehouse after she sacrificed herself to save me. The third matched a missing person case from 1978. The fourth from 1980. The pattern unfolded like a wound finally split open. The state police arrested Harold Reisman, and within 48 hours, Sheriff Patterson and 2 retired officers were also taken into custody for obstruction and conspiracy. The town of Cedar Falls would spend the next 2 years disentangling itself from the lies. It would never fully succeed. Some stains don't wash out. Weeks later, I returned to the library, the place I nearly died, and sat at the same audio booth with the recovered digital copy of Sarah and Anna's evidence. Not to investigate, not to run, but to listen, to honor them. The final minute of the tape, the one that ended just before chaos erupted in 1979, carried Sarah's last recorded words. "Anna, if he finds this, make sure someone hears it. Anyone. Please. Just don't let me disappear." I sat in that booth for a long time. Then I made a promise, to Sarah, to Anna, to every woman buried under that house. You didn't disappear. Not anymore. My documentary aired 6 months later. The world learned everything. Every lie. Every cover-up. Every victim's name. Families finally had answers. Investigators reopened dozens of cases. A task force was formed to review every disappearance linked to Cedar Falls from 1970 to 1990. When viewers ask me what I remember most from this case, it isn't the tape. It isn't the chase. It isn't even Reisman's face the day he was arrested. It's a much quieter moment. Standing at Sarah Linden's gravesite, placing the repaired cassette beside her new headstone, engraved with her real story, not the one he tried to write. She was no longer missing. She was found. She was heard. She was believed. And in the end, her voice, the one he tried to silence, became the one that brought him down. If you think this is a good story, hit the like and subscribe button.